Today I'd like to describe how I mud drywall in 2 primary coats and a 3rd touch-up coat. It all starts off with the tape that you start off with. For my purposes, I like the fiber tape. Has fibers in 2 different directions. It sticks to the wall on its own, so that eliminates 1 coat of embedding the tape. If you're using the standard paper tape, you're going to need at least 3 coats and then a 4th touch-up coat. Standard paper tape has a groove in the middle, which is kind of tough to determine here. You kind of see it there. I typically use it just for corners. So inside corners, and inside corners only. Outside corners, I simply use a corner bead. And I definitely prefer metal corner bead. So anyway, this is 2 coats here. I'm actually getting ready to come in and do a 3rd coat, which is going to be a touch-up coat. I like to, after I sand my 2nd coat off, I only sand the 2nd coat. I don't sand the 1st coat. I'll go through and I'll look and see if maybe I got in too deep like I did over here. Sorry guys, the light ain't exactly the greatest in here, but in this area here I actually ended up getting into the fiber mesh tape. There's a 2nd type of fiber mesh tape that you can get that is actually it's called fiber tape. Yeah, again, the light's not the greatest here, so here we are. It's called extra strength, and this one actually has a like a 3rd direction of fiber there. It's kind of tough for the camera to pick up. Hope you guys can see it. It's kind of going diagonally there. And you got 2, one that goes this way and one that goes that way, perpendicular to each other. I have tried this tape before. I do not like it. It seems like it adds an extra layer of mud. It's thicker than this other tape that I typically use. Trial and error, I guess. Again, I mean, I really seem to like this a lot better. It's a lot more rigid. And if you accidentally sand into it, it doesn't fuzz out like the other stuff does. And this is also called fiber tape, so it's the same brand, but different type of tape. I like it a lot better. So anyway, for inside corners, I know you guys are probably wondering, well, how do you do the inside corners if you use paper tape in 2 primary coats and a 3rd touch-up coat? So what I actually do, guys, is I take my first layer, put my tape in. I actually put my mud in first, put my tape in, and then I'll take and go over the tape with a corner trowel, and then that'll squeeze out the mud. So see, that's 1 coat there. And then I'll come back with another coat, and I'll go over it pretty thick. Not real thick, but pretty thick. And you can actually see this 2nd coat, and I haven't sanded it yet. So I mean, you can kind of see it still kind of has some ridges there and stuff I got to sand off. And then I actually expanded it out to here, but I've kind of made it a little thicker through here, and it didn't crack up or anything. I didn't water the mud down or anything either. So I'm using +3 mud, which comes in a blue lid. This is +3 joint compound. It's a little lighter weight than the standard drywall compound that USG makes. I like it better. I actually use it for everything. So I don't just use it for just a primary coat. I use it for primary and finishing coats. And I think it works really well. So this is the only thing that I purchase whenever I'm doing drywall, and as far as mud goes. Yeah, getting tapered drywall is also a big benefit here. If I was to sand this down flush, I have 2 tapers here, for the 2 different pieces of drywall. They mostly come tapered anymore, but just make sure that your edges are beveled and tapered. Your piece of tape goes in here in between the 2 pieces of drywall that you hang up, and they're tapered joints, so you don't need quite as much mud in there to cover up the tape. For butt joints, like say you had say you had like 2 pieces of drywall come together that didn't have a tapered end, you're going to have to expand that out. Sometimes that does take 3 coats. and then a fourth touch-up coat, maybe, you know, depending on how your 3 coats go. It's harder to hide that because the tape is out a little higher than the recessed joints. Now you can see on this one, maybe, if I can, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a piece of tape there that you can kind of see. You can kind of see the edge of it right in there. Yeah, I sanded through that by accident. I don't usually hand sand, guys. I tend to use a drywall sander. I bought this drywall sander from Wynn back, been a few months ago. It's got its workout in. I mean, I like it pretty well. I mean, it's the cheaper end, but I think all in all I paid like 160 bucks for this machine, and it had 2 separate heads. Second head I didn't much care for, but the round head and the drywall sander together, you know, by themselves without the dual head would have been like 106 bucks or something. Wasn't much. The dual heads was like 160, like I mentioned before. So I mean, if you're wanting to get into this, you know, and you know, if you're drywalling a whole house or something, yeah, definitely consider purchasing one of these. If you're just doing a room or something like that, yeah, I mean, you can hand sand pretty quick, depending on what you use. I actually, whenever I'm hand sanding, when I'm doing my touch up and stuff, I actually like to go back over it with a corner sponge sander. This is a fine grit sponge sander. You can find them at about any hardware store. They're really good for drywall, and the corners especially. Which that's one thing that this machine will not do. It will not get into the corners very well. In fact, whenever you get up there towards the top, which, yeah, I didn't sand this yet, but you'll see that it'll kind of round it off right here, and it'll be higher in this section. So you'll end up having to get in there with that sponge sander and, you know, sand it down, and also sand in your corners real good, so you can get a nice reveal in there. Yeah, another thing, a lot of people have problems with nails, you know, going over your nails or your screws. I use screws actually, guys, so I recess the screws in, you know, very little, just enough to where it's indenting the paper. So basically the screw is just slightly less than flush with the paper here. So whenever you go to mud over it, it takes like maybe 2 coats. A third possibly, depending on if they fill in, like I said, this is 2 coats. So I mean, there's just a tiny little hole right there that you can see. I would fill that in with mud on my 3rd coat. Looks like most of the screws here are covered pretty well. This area here, I can sand down a little more if I really wanted to. It don't take long to sand it down at all. So, I mean, really, you know, you guys, you're not looking to sand this all the way down. You're looking to get a nice tapered edge. So whenever you go to paint it, you know, it's not going to show. Also, another thing I've noticed, a lot of people think that paint with primer is the same thing as putting primer on and then tape and then painting. That's not the case. There's 2 different types of primer. One is a new drywall primer, and the other one is a primer, you know, specifically for paint. You know, the new drywall primer will protect your drywall, and it'll also make a nice solid coat for your paint to stick to. And if you do your new drywall primer, which is, I typically use PVA, but I've heard a lot of people say that they don't like PVA. I've never had any issues with it. PVA primer will, you know, cover everything. When you come back the next day, if you notice even, you know, a joint here and there, you can go back over it again. You'll never notice it after that. And then when you go to paint over it, you definitely won't notice it. I usually just go over 1 coat with PVA primer and then put a layer of paint on top of it. It actually works really well. I've never had any issues with it. Maybe I can take you over here and show you a room I've done in this house, and you know, you can kind of tell for yourself. It's not completely painted, but it's pretty close to done. So this is the living room area in the house. This is the area that we painted. You know, obviously, like I said, you know, we haven't got it completely done yet. I usually use the edger for the corners up top, so I do them last. And edger for around the thermostat. So, oh boy, it's getting blurry, ain't it? Come on, work with me. All right, I'm back. And it's getting fuzzy again. Okay. All right, there we go. Now it looks better. All right, so yeah, sorry for the mess, guys. I'm under construction, so you know how it goes. But this is, what it looks like after it's been painted, with the PVA underneath of it, and my drywall method for mudding and everything. So it looks pretty good. I mean, I don't see any issues with it. This is satin paint, by the way. If you look down the wall, maybe, okay. If you look down the wall, I mean, it looks really good. Basically the only differences you see, this is one coat of paint, guys, this isn't two, so you can kind of see, different strokes, that kind of thing. But it's really tough to see any joints. I mean, I know where it's at, but if I didn't know where it was, I probably wouldn't be able to see it at all. And, I could probably go over that again with another coat, and you'd never see it. So, I think it looks pretty good for just one coat of paint.